print out my sending a request for sensor data, and it shows me what I'm trying to get to there. What's that actual server that I'm trying to connect to? So look at those and make sure that your HTTP address is correct. Typically people forget to put things like a question mark in there or an ampersand, and they've not built the URL correctly. Or you've not set the permissions. You might get an error coming back saying either file not found, which means it's tried to connect but nobody's responded. If it comes back with a security problem, it's generally that your machine can't make that connection for some reason. That could be permissions, you've not granted it internet permission, you've not used this bit about smart mode, strict mode. That thing sort of crashed out eventually there. You've got this failed to connect. But again, I sort of know where it's coming from. Either you can do a log.i, or you can just do a system out print line if you like, and then you'll get that system error identifier with it there, the sort of W system error. That can be a bit harder to trace which ones are yours, because other programs might be using that sort of tag as well. In general, use a log to send out where it's coming from. So that's just sort of giving up, failed to connect, timeout. Again, just try and use a bit of your nous to think about what's sort of gone on there. It's not saying that there's anything wrong with that URL. It's just saying, well, yeah, nobody's responded within a certain time. So in this case, probably that the server's not running to sort of get it. So I'll just use that logging approach. For whatever reason, I'm not too able to sort of get to the code too well. I wanted just to show you that sort of logging message just inside the code. But yeah, but take a careful note. Just definitely make use of that logging service. Now, most of these things are sort of pointed out in there about this bit about read the error messages. But it may be that the problem isn't inside your Android program. It could be over at the Tomcat side. So again, use some sort of print messages over on your terminal. Whenever it receives something, tell it to print it out. If it's sending something back, print it out on the local terminal so you can see what's being issued before it sends it back. That way you'll be able to sort of track it going around all the 6 or 7 different stages that it's going through. But so many problems, and I'd say literally here about 90% of the help messages are to do with these sorts of things. Incorrect URLs, incorrect SQL statements, or Android networking problems. They're by far the most common problems that I'm being asked to deal with. Once you've dealt with those a couple of times, you get much better at it. So please try those first, rather than getting a bit sort of worked up and saying, oh, I just can't sort of do this. Because you will be asked to, you are supposed to be able to do this on your own as coders, to be able to sort of work with it. It may be that you've generated an incorrect SQL statement, so always print out what you think that SQL is that you've generated from the parameters maybe that you've sent in. And you can copy that and paste it perhaps into an interactive MySQL. So if you've generated some MySQL from this parameter that you sent across either from your Phidget or from your Android code, and then you say execute that SQL, print it on the screen, and then try and do it in an interactive session. Just paste it into an SQL session, and that will test whether or not that syntax is correct. Because it may well be there that's a problem. Jar files are another common problem to it, particularly if you send me something to sort out for you, and you've added a jar file, but you've not added it correctly to the existing project. Because when you add a jar file, you can add an external jar, or make it part of the project. If you had an external jar, it just means it's somewhere on your PC, like in your downloads folder or something like that you've downloaded, and you're telling your project to use that one over there. If you then send me that code, I don't have access to your downloads folder to it, you're sort of remotely. It sounds obvious when you're sort of getting it explained to you, but always make sure your jar files are actually part of the project itself. Paste them into the project, adjust your build path to sort of put them in. Runtime systems, like Tomcat when it's running a servlet, although you've got MySQL added to the project, it may come back and say, I can't find MySQL when you've added it to the project. That's fine for when you're compiling it, but underneath your webbing folder on your Eclipse Tomcat one, that's where the MySQL jar should also be, because that's where it's needed at runtime. So everything inside your web content is what's used at runtime for it, rather than at compile time. So although it all compiles okay, you may find this error saying driver not firing for MySQL, and it could easily be that you've just not got it in that web-inf lib. You won't get it with the project that I've given you because I've put it in there already. But if you create a brand new one, it's easy to forget to put that sort of thing in there. So as I say, they're some of the sort of typical issues with it. And many people have come along to me and said, how can I get higher marks in my work? Is it okay to use the code that you've given us? Yes, it's okay to use the code that I've given you in the exercises. And that should be more than enough to get you a pass, if you can piece it together correctly. That'll get you a sort of pass. It does actually connect your Phidgets to the database, and it'll retrieve something from the database and turn a motor. There's enough to do that in there, which will get you somewhere in the 50s for that particular section. To go beyond that, then you have to start doing things that are a bit more advanced, obviously, and working with, the basic thing says that send at least 2 sensors to the server. That can be any sensors. It can be any one of those sorts of sensors, or one of these and an RFID, just any 2 different sensors. The idea there being that you're trying to show a bit of generic code being used, and that you're correctly identifying the sensor that you're sending across to it. And hopefully, as I say, you can share some code between them for it. Similarly, in the Android section, you should be using some of the code that you've used inside that Phidget one. You'll find that the things that you use to send the data and retrieve it is just the same method that you can just take almost directly and put inside your Android code. Now, all that sort of thing, based on what you've done in the labs, for that section should get you, as I say, somewhere in the sort of mid-60s. To get beyond that, you need to start thinking about things like the actuators. The demo that I gave you did turn a motor. It contacts the server, says, tell me what the new value of the motor is, and then it turns the motor to that particular position. That's the thing, yeah, that gets you the basic sort of pass. But realistically, you want it to be asking the server over and over again. You don't just want it doing it once. You want it doing it multiple times. So really, that polling should be in a loop. You can get rid of, once you get the thing working, you can get rid of all the previous motor turns. They were just still left in there from the demo and to show that the motor is actually turning. So that sort of actuator should be repeatedly asking for values, polling it, and acting upon as needed rather than just a single request to sort of get in there. The data going to and from should be wrapped up in some way. JSON or XML, probably JSON is the easiest way. You've got a JSON handler, but that can sort of cause a problem to it. And there's reasons why we're asking you to do it in JSON rather than just, well, it's an extra bit of work for you to do because we're cruel. Sending in JSON. The old way of doing it is that you had some sort of URL and then question mark, sensor name equals, say, motor, and sensor value equals 100. So you do a request like that, or that was to insert or to retrieve. You'd have whatever the URL is, sensor name equals slider, and get data equals true. And that was the sort of general idea to insert or retrieve data. If we start to now make these a bit more complex, and say, well, actually, you know the light, I might say, well, to insert something for a light, then the sensor name is the hue bulb, and the sensor value is on. So it's on or off. The thing with a hue bulb is that it's got multiple qualities to it. It's got a brightness, it's got a colour, it's got a saturation, as well as an on-off state. So what you might end up doing is to send a whole sort of series of parameters, and having to do, say, 4 calls for sensor name equals the hue and sensor value equals red. And then you're saying, oh, well, actually, those sensor values, that should be more like, that's the hue bulb state.